What I'm going to be tying today is a fly called the hood rat. It's made to imitate a field mouse or some type of critter scurrying across the surface. I'm going to start off here with the TMCO 8089 special use hook. This is more like a bass style hook. I'm going to do it in a 10. I'm going to be tying it for trout. You can tie it in a size 6 or a 4, something big for bass or larger game, even pike. So to start off, I'm going to use some thicker thread, either UTC 140 or 210. The color doesn't matter so much. You can use olive, brown, white, really whatever you want. The thread is going to be covered up for the most part on this bug. So I'm just using olive. I had it handy. So I'm just going to lay a sloppy thread base down. It doesn't have to be pretty. We're going to cover up everything. And then I'm going to take some medium chenille, ultra chenille, which you usually tie San Juan worms with. And I'm going to cut a piece off that's about 4 inches long and kind of straighten it out so I get a nice straight piece. I'm using brown, dark brown. This is going to be the tail. You can use tan or other colors, but I like my dark brown for the tail. That's more natural. And I burn the end to kind of taper it. Then I'm going to tie my tail in. I'm going to leave it fairly long. You can always trim it back, so I'm going to leave it hanging off 2.5, almost 3 inches off the back of the hook. And I'm going to lay down some nice tight wraps. Again, it can be sloppy. It doesn't have to be pretty. Just enough to hold it down. Trim your tag off. Now I'm going to take 2 strips of zonkered rabbit. Each strip is about 1 inch long. And I am actually going to tie the back of the strip in, so you can see how that piece swoops back. I'm going to be tying this back end into the back of the fly, and I want it to face, both pieces to face into the fly. So I'm going to tie this on my far side right in like that. That way when I fold this forward, it all lays back nice and natural. So you have to kind of think backwards when you tie this in. So you tie it facing into the hook. I'm just going to tie that back end in just like that and put it in there nice and tight. And then I'm going to do my near side. Same exact thing. And both these pieces, you kind of want them out of the way because we're going to be tying in some foam after this. Okay. Next, I'm going to tie in 2 strips of foam on each side, almost on the underside, kind of on the side and the bottom, in kind of like that. And each of these pieces are about 1/4 of an inch thick, about 2.5, 3 inches long. And I'm going to tie these facing backwards as well, right against that strip of rabbit that we tied in. You can kind of see how that's downward a little bit. It's not right on the side, it's facing down, and you'll see why here in a minute. And same thing on my side. Sometimes you can kind of force them down with your fingers. And don't worry, like I said, if it's sloppy, we're going to cover all this up. Doesn't have to be pretty. Okay, now we're going to tie the top of the mouse. I cut a piece that's about 1/2 inch wide. You can go a little bit thicker, a little bit thinner if you wanted to. I find about 1/2 inch is good for most of these rats. Then I'm going to angle it ever so slightly, just like that, just to kind of make it easier to tie in. Just kind of for that first wrap to bite down on. And I'm going to wrap back up onto it all the way to where I tied in the rabbit and those 2 thinner pieces of foam. And I kind of lift it to make sure everything's covered. We're looking good. Okay. Now once I've got that in there, I need to build an underbody. If I just started folding all this as is, it would be very thin. A mouse has, a little bit of a round profile. It's got a little bit of meat on his bones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bunch of that brown chenille, a solid 1.5 foot of it, tie it in. Make sure it's secure. Bring my thread all the way up to the eye, and now what I'm going to do is just kind of build up a big underbody. And you don't have to use the same color as chenille. You can use whatever, really. You can use peacock, you can use a strip of rabbit, the leather part, but I'm just going to use this chenille. You could use some woolly bugger chenille, because we're just going to cover most of this up. All I'm trying to do is build up a taper, make it look like a little critter. Just like that. And now what I'm going to do is just tie it off right up by the eye. Just like that. Now I have to make one more step. This step is key. If I was just to start folding the foam and finish the fly, what would happen is the fly wouldn't necessarily ride the way I want it to ride. With foam, it's somewhat unpredictable as far as how it's going to float. A lot of times you could cast this fly, and with the way it is, it would float upside down, it wouldn't strip correctly. So what you do to fix that is you're going to add some weight to the bottom. And what that does is it makes the fly ride upright. The weight kind of pulls the belly down and makes it ride properly. Now, too much weight and it'll sink. Not enough weight and it won't do the job properly. So what you want to do is you want to just use a little piece of lead tape. I cut a piece about a 1/4 to an 1/8 of an inch wide, and it's probably 1/2 an inch long, maybe, just like that. And all I'm going to do is peel the backing off of that sticky tape, and I'm going to lay it right under the fly. And since it's sticky, I can just kind of stick it to the bottom, just like that. Now, this is what makes this fly work, and what makes it ride properly. And you don't have to tie it in. All the foam we're going to fold here in a minute is going to hold it in place. So just leave it just like it is. Next, I'm going to take that bottom piece of foam, and well, actually I'm going to take my thread. I'm going to wrap upwards on that body just a little bit to kind of advance my where I'm going to lash down everything back a little bit. And then next I'm going to take a loose wrap over it and tighten down on the next one. All I did was just tie that piece of foam on the belly. And I'm going to do the same thing on this far side. Loose wrap and then kind of bite down on it. And then you can kind of maneuver these strips a little bit so they mesh somewhat close together, just like that. Now, once you've gotten to that point, we're going to take the pieces of rabbit one by one, and I'm going to pull them forward over the piece of foam, just like that. And what this rabbit's going to do is it's going to give it some life. If I just use foam and no rabbit, it wouldn't look like the real deal. So what I'm going to do is just tie that in almost like I tied the foam in. Just pull it forward right over the top of those two pieces of foam. Bite down. And it doesn't have to be pretty, it just needs to be furry. And next I'm going to trim off pieces of leather, leave a little bit hanging off, it doesn't matter. And then what I'm going to do is fold over the top part, just like that. I'm going to kind of pinch it all down so it hugs the top of the body. And I'm going to do a loose wrap, and one more that's a little bit tighter, and bite down. Just like that. Then I'm going to take these two pieces of foam and I'm going to fold them back just a little bit, and I'm kind of going to double it up over itself. You see how I did that? I made a little bit of a loop, and then I'm just going to take my thread and bite down on that loop. What this does is it helps it push water and makes it float a little better. And I'm going to do the same thing on my side, and I try to make the loops relatively close to the same size, just like that. Bite down on that one. Just like that. Then I'm going to trim those, and I'm going to leave just a little bit of foam hanging off. Just like that. That gives it a bit of a wake. Then I'm going to trim the hood I'm going to round it just slightly. You don't want to leave too much of this hood exposed, but you also don't want to cut it too close. I found that the magic size is about a little less than ½ inch. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my super glue, Zap-A-Gap, and I'm going to apply just a little bit to the thread. That way when I make these next few wraps, it's going to bite down on itself and super glue that thread and all that foam together. And realistically, you could probably cut it right here and not whip finish, but I'm actually going to whip finish. You can never be too careful, especially when you're tying a more complicated fly like this. You like it to stay together. Whip finished over all that, tighten it up and trim, and there we go. You have a hood rat, and you can see the belly there. You can see these strips just kind of splay out to the side just like that. In the water, this thing just looks like the real deal. This chenille gets really soft, really supple, and actually wiggles just like a mouse. And you kind of skate it, twitch the rod a little bit. If you want to pop it, this little lip here will actually pop just like a popper. So for bass and more aggressive fish, they really go nuts for it. So there you go. That's the hood rat.